All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are back in my workshop with the Novid Kwashiorkor's video. It's been a while since we've been together. I've been trying not to cough my way through videos. This is the fourth take on here. I'm trying not to cough. We'll get through this. I've got a drink over there. I may have to cough my way through it, but I don't have a virus. I'm sorry. I have allergies. Every winter, I know it's strange to think of allergies in the winter, but I have some kind of a cough. Sits in almost every winter. It's been going on for years, and I don't like it, but that's what we have to deal with. So hopefully get through this without coughing my way through it. But today we're looking at digestive diseases. Specifically, we're looking at one called Kwashiorkor's disease. Yes, long name. It's not in your chapter 17, but remember that I add things to the chapter because one chapter is just too easy. So we add other things that are kind of big questions. I think in digestive diseases, there's a lot of them. They're big questions. So we're looking at Kwashiorkor's disease, not only because it's a digestive issue, a digestive disease, but it's a nice exercise in understanding the digestive system, and it segues beautifully into the cardiovascular unit, which we have to start sometime soon. All right. So I know you guys are missing school. I drove by there the other day, and several of you had your faces up against the windows, and you're like looking in, and I know you're missing it. I'm missing it too. But we got to work this out until we get safe from this COVID thing. By the way, after this video, I want you to go take the quiz on this video. And if you've been paying attention to announcements, which you need to do, there's going to be video quizzes quite a bit. So we'll have a lesson on something, go back and take the quiz. The quiz is timed, so you have to know your stuff. You may take notes, and you can use your notes on that quiz, but the quiz is going to be timed. There's plenty of time to do it. But, you know, I'm very hesitant to have a test, a major test, or any quiz really online. I just don't think you can, I don't think you can make it fair for everybody, okay? But we're going to do that. Video quizzes, there's one after this. Check it out. This is going to be Kwashiorkor's. Now, going to Kwashiorkor's, we have to combine buckets, all right? So I want you to imagine that we have buckets of understanding. We have to like look at separate buckets, understand what those buckets are, and we're going to call them buckets of paint. All right, so consider them different colors of paint. At the end, when we try to understand it, we're going to pour all the buckets of paint together. Hopefully, it'll all make sense. But Kwashiorkor's for you on the test will not make sense unless you understand separate buckets that look at first like they're random buckets that they shouldn't belong in that topic. But later we pour them all together, it'll make sense. So let's go to bucket number one. Bucket number one is osmosis. Osmosis. You guys haven't seen osmosis for a long time, all right? It's been probably 2 or 3 years, I guess, since you looked at osmosis, probably back in biology class. So we're going to look at osmosis, and we're going to make sure we understand osmosis. That's going to be our first bucket in this particular video. So we're going to Kwashiorkor's. This is video 8, I believe. And this is the Novid Kwashiorkor video. We're looking now first at this topic called osmosis. Now, osmosis, if you look at definition, it's a water movement towards regions of greater solute concentrations. That's basically what it is. Back in, I don't know, 9th grade, you may have had an egg thing where you dissolve the shell off an egg, and your teacher made you put the egg in different things, and sometimes the egg swelled up, and sometimes the egg shriveled up. I do that with my biology class. And it's all designed to show you osmosis. So if we're going very basic here, probably shouldn't draw, but I'm going to try to draw a beaker. And there's a fluid, and let's say we have an egg, call it a cell, and the egg is a cell, but it has no shell on it. We're going to see what happens when you put it in different things. Remember the definition for osmosis is water movement towards a region of greater solute concentration. And a solute is anything you dissolve in a fluid. If you dissolve sugar in a fluid, that's a solute, or I should say water. If you dissolve salt in water, that's a solute. If you have proteins in water, the protein is a solute. So water always moves towards the greater solute concentration. So let's say that we can use any measurement we want. Let's say there's 15 parts per million ppm salt out here. All right, so you dissolve a little bit of salt in the water to make it 15 parts per million salt. And let's say we drop this egg in here, and the egg has 90 parts per million of a solute. Okay, if water always moves towards the greater solute concentration, then what's going to happen here? That means the water that's out here is going to move to the 90 because 90 is bigger than 15, and the egg should swell up. until it reaches equilibrium. Because if you see what's going on here, as the egg swells, that parts per million drops because you're adding some water in that. So eventually it's going to reach equilibrium, but this one, in this case, the egg is going to swell up because the water is going to stream inside the egg. Let's change things around a little bit though. Let's say this is only 10 parts per million. What happens to this cell in this case? Well, it's going to shrink. It's going to get smaller. Water is going to leave the cell across that membrane. The water is going to mix in with this. It's going to change this, and it's going to change that, but eventually you're going to reach equilibrium. Essentially, though, the egg is going to shrink, the cell is going to shrink in this case. That's basic osmosis. Now, some of you may have experimented with osmosis when you were younger, and I hope you did, because none of you would do this, would you? But I hope you didn't, like, I can't draw, what is this supposed to be? I'm trying to draw a slug. There's Mr. Slug, eyeball. Looks like he's smiling, but he's not going to be smiling here in a second. All right, here we go. There's my slug. You guys wouldn't do this. None of you do this because this is just pure evil, but some of you ran inside when you were a little kid, you got a salt shaker, and you ran out to that poor little slug who's doing the best he can to get away, and you sprinkled salt on that poor slug. And then you grinned and you had an evil laugh while you're doing it. Well, that salt, which in this case is acting as a solute, the salt is covering now the outside of the slug. What is going to happen to the slug? You're going to have a higher solute concentration outside of the slug, and the water from inside the slug is going to stream out, and it's going to ooze out all this fluid because you created an osmotic potential. And as that little shrug, I don't know what a shrug is. That's a slug. As the slug shriveled and died, you giggled with glee. And you may not have known it, but you were working some science at that point. You were doing osmosis at that point. All right? Others of you know this, and you know that they say don't drink salt water. They say if you're out on a raft, you don't drink salt water. Well, there's some truth to that, and that's because of osmotic potentials. By the way, movie theaters work on this. Movie theaters, they want you to get thirsty, right? Now, they have to have water fountains in the movie theater, but they don't want you to drink the water, all right? They want to get you super thirsty. How do they get you super thirsty? Number one, they add a lot of solutes to their popcorn. If you buy popcorn, what's on that popcorn? A ton of salt and a ton of butter. Those are both solutes. All right, so you eat that. Now, suddenly you feel thirsty. So you think, well, if you're like me, you think, I got to find some water somewhere. It's free, right? And they have to have water. They have to have a certain amount of water fountains per the number of people that it's a law. All right, but where does the movie theater put their water fountains? They hide them behind recessed walls, and they put them right by the bathroom because nobody wants to drink water with the smell of feces floating around that area. Go look at our movie theater and tell me that's not true. They hide them so you just can't see them, and then they put them right by the bathroom doors because they don't want you to drink the water. They want you to go buy a Coke for like 19 bucks. That's what they want. All right, they are working on your osmotic potentials. They're trying to do osmosis. The business people know osmosis. They know they can get you thirsty if they add a lot of salt and butter to their popcorn, and then they don't want you to find that water fountain. Don't you drink that water. Buy our Coke instead. All right, so that's it. Now, hopefully, the bucket of osmosis, that understanding, that bucket, is now filled up. You know what osmosis is. You know the idea behind it. You see how it works and things. So hopefully, that bucket is filled up. Now, we're going to take that bucket, and we're going to put it to the side. All right? We're going to put it to the side. It's not random, but we're putting it to the side. Now, we're going to look at a different topic, and we're going to look at capillaries. Now, I'm going to do something I probably shouldn't do because this is too wet to write on. I have a wet rag, and I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to dry it off a little bit with the intestines that we used earlier. But now we're looking at capillaries. Going to cardiovascular system. That's going to be our next topic, by the way. If my body is my heart is going to pump blood into arteries. All right? And the arteries are going to break into smaller arterioles. They're called arterioles. Now, the arterioles, we have the heart pumping into arteries that split into smaller arterioles. The arterioles are going to form capillaries. When I do this, I'm saying these are the capillaries. The capillaries. This is where fluids can then leave and come back into the system. They're not supposed to leave the arteries, they're not supposed to leave the arterioles, but at the capillaries, fluid is supposed to go out around the cells in what we call the interstitial space, deliver oxygen, pick up waste products, and then drain back into this side of the capillaries and come back through the venual system. All right, so arteries lead to arterioles, which lead to capillaries, which lead to venules, small veins, which leads to veins, which then enter the heart. So we're focusing now on capillaries. I'm going to try to draw capillaries, but let's go ahead and let's draw, if I can, capillaries. How does a capillary look? Very basic capillary. It kind of looks like this. Depending on the tissue, there will be a lot more branches than 3, but it just depends. Neurological tissue has a whole bunch of branches. Sometimes these little spaces, these little tubes in the capillaries, only one red blood cell can fit through them at one time. Sometimes they're that small. All right, we're talking super small capillaries. Now, there's 2 forces you have to know that are in play here. Now, there's little gaps that allow the fluid from inside to seep outside of the capillaries. Now, some of you know what blood looks like if you spin it in a test tube. It's got the heavier part. That's the blood cells, the blood platelets, and it's all dark red. But then above it, if you spin it real fast, you get a yellowish fluid, all right? And that's the plasma, the blood plasma. That plasma is the part that carries out of the capillaries. It squirts out. The other things are too big to leave the capillaries, all right? And those things, they tend to be things like plasma proteins. And you get your plasma proteins by having a protein source in your diet. You eat some chicken, you increase your plasma proteins. All right, now they're all flowing this direction through the capillaries. But some of that clear fluid that's carrying nutrients, that's carrying oxygen, it can squirt out on this side of the capillaries due to something that we call hydrostatic pressure. And that's the pressure your heart is putting on your blood. That's the pressure that causes a pulse, where you can feel a pulse somewhere. Hydrostatic pressure is high over here, squirts that clear fluid out over here. But there's also an osmotic potential here, because you have these things, these are solutes in a fluid, and they're going to cause an osmotic pressure. So let's say this pressure on this side, this is going to be the hydrostatic pressure. Let us just say it's 55 millimeters of mercury, which they tend to measure this pressure. Let's say it's 55. That's really high. You shouldn't be that high, by the way. But let's say the osmotic pressure is 25 millimeters of mercury. Osmotic's 25, hydro's 55. Osmotic pressure wants to draw things to the solutes on the inside because they're going to be greater than the outside. Water always moves towards the region of greater solute concentration. Hydrostatic pressure, though, on this side is going to be higher. All right, you're going to squirt that fluid out because osmotic can't draw it in. On this side, it's being overpowered. All right, now on this side, things change on the other side of the capillaries. It's kind of like those old school water pistols, you know, those water guns where you squirt. You guys probably have never seen one. I grew up with those. Y'all have like battery powered things with air tanks, and they're super awesome. I had the little pistol. We thought it was high tech, by the way. You squeeze the trigger and it would squirt like that. Well, there's a point where you squeeze the trigger and the pressure is no longer there to push out the fluid. And that's what happens in your capillaries. Let's say hydrostatic pressure, though, drops on this side because you squeezed out all the fluid over here. Now it's going to drop to 15 millimeters of mercury. What is osmotic pressure? Osmotic pressure is the same because the plasma proteins are the same on both sides. They're not getting squirted out. So osmo is going to be high over here. Osmotic pressure on this side is 25 millimeters of mercury. So it stays the same. What happens on this side of the capillaries? Well, fluid draws back in. Fluid draws back in. All right? Now you want this to happen. This is what your body works with osmotic, osmotic potentials majorly like this. Your kidneys, for example, that's how they function. They work on separating the nasty stuff from your blood to urine, and from the clean blood, they work on osmotic potentials hugely. Your whole body does this, by the way. Every single second, you rely on this happening in your body. Okay, you got to have it. Some of you may have heard the lady in the competition years ago, but many of you have heard this. The competition was at a mall, and it was called Hold Your Pee for a Wee. And you could see if you could win a Wii. She wanted to win a Wii for her son. This is how old this was, because back when Wiis were popular. All right, so she went inside the mall. They put her in this space. The rules essentially were you drink a certain amount of water every 5 minutes, 15 minutes. I can't remember how it was. Basically trying to fill up your bladder. And the longer you can wait without leaving that area to, excuse me, to go to the bathroom, the better chance you had to win. Okay? She didn't even win. She came in second place. She drank a lot of water. She stayed in there a long time. She said, I'm going to win my son a Wii. Now, she didn't realize it, and the mall didn't realize it, but she was completely messing with her osmotic potentials. She was messing them all up. All right? So she left second place. Somebody else won the Wii. She got home. She was so messed up osmotically that she had all kinds of issues. She later died. Unfortunately, she died from this. So you might ask, how can you die from drinking too much water? Well, if you don't regulate your osmotic potentials, and you drink so much and you don't regulate, you're going to have some issues. Yes, water can cause some issues. I should say an imbalance in osmotic potentials can cause some issues. Her head swelled up. She had encephalitis. She had huge headaches. Her system shut. She suffered huge organ failure because of this. All right, so we're talking about something very serious that happens in the body. All right, so hopefully now this bucket makes sense. We have the other bucket, we put it up, it was osmosis. Now we have the capillaries bucket. Hopefully it makes sense. Water, I should say plasma squirts out on this side, is drawn back in on this side, and you are able to deliver nutrients and deliver things and pull them back in. This is basically capillaries. All right, so now we're going to take those two buckets, we're going to pour them in one big bucket, and we're going to call that bucket the Kwashiorkor bucket. Here's what happens in Kwashiorkor's disease. And it's where the kids, I don't know if you've seen pictures of them, don't call. But these kids who are starving, their bellies swell out. They have huge bellies. All right, and so you have to ask the question, if you're starving, why would you have a big belly? Why would your belly swell out? And I remember back when I was a little kid, TV, we would have videos of poverty, starving kids all the time, commercials. They were asking for money to send to this organization to help feed the starving. All right, it's an awful thing when people are starving. I haven't seen, I don't know why, but I haven't seen those for decades on TV anywhere. All right, but you've seen about dogs and all that kind of stuff, but not humans anymore. I don't know why. But I remember asking my mom a long time ago, I said, Mom, if they're starving, why are their bellies swollen up? I don't get it. And my mom said something that I'll never forget. So bothers me now that she said this. She said, I think it's because they have to eat rocks. And here I am, this little kid, I'm like 4 or 5 years old, and I had this awful vision of these poor kids having to eat rocks. And their belly, this awful imagery of rocks filling up their bellies. It's completely wrong. All right, completely wrong. I don't know why she said that, but here's the answer for Kwashiorkors. All right, here's your answer. If you're in a third world developing country, typically you don't have a really good diet. All right, in America, we don't understand this. We got food everywhere. We got too much food. We got all kinds of people who are overweight. I'm one of them, and we don't have that issue here. But you have poor nutrients in developing countries, really poor countries. In fact, the word Kwashiorkor is a Ghanaian word that means the evil spirit that strikes the firstborn when the second child comes. Now, I don't know how they get all that from this long word, but that's what it means in the Ghanaian language. The evil spirit that strikes the firstborn when the second-born comes. All right, so let's say you have a family, and you're a poverty family, and say you're in Ghana, all right, Ethiopia, Ghana, something like that. You have your first kid. Now, the best food for a baby, and it doesn't matter what country you live in, is breast milk, all right? Nothing better for a baby than mama's milk, than human milk. All right, so you have a baby, baby goes to breast milk. You feed the baby a protein-rich breast milk that comes from you. All right, then you have another baby. What happens to the first baby? The firstborn? That baby goes off breast milk, new baby goes on breast milk, and suddenly that first baby has a huge change in something, a huge change. They suddenly have a huge change in plasma proteins because breast milk is protein rich. They have a huge drop in plasma proteins. Now, what do you eat if you're taking off breast milk in a third world country? you tend to eat what we would call it gruel, all right? It tends to be made from a plant called a cassava plant. They pull a plant out, it has this root, this tuber, it looks like to me a white fat carrot, all right? It's a big carrot-like looking thing. You crunch it up with a rock, you put it in water, you boil it, and that's your food for the day, all right? It's got some nutrients in it, but it doesn't have protein, it doesn't have much protein at all. And so you went from protein-rich breast milk to cassava, ground up cassava in boiling water. That's your meal almost every day. So your blood plasmas drop. What happens when your blood plasmas drop? Well, this osmotic potential drops. Let's say it drops to 5 millimeters of mercury. In other words, you still squirt out a whole bunch, but you're not able to draw back into the bloodstream. So that clear fluid in your blood squirts out, and there's not enough osmotic potential caused by plasma proteins to draw it back in. And where does this happen in the body? For these kids, it happens right here in the belly. So that swelling is fluid. It's fluid that came from their blood that got squirted out into the cavities inside this area, and it's not being drawn back in. Okay? It's like an edema. If you know about edemas, pulmonary edema, tissue edema, is a fluid presses out, squirts out, but there's not enough osmotic potential to bring it back in, and so it stays out and it just keeps accumulating. All right, that's the swelling in Kwashiorkor's disease. All right, there's going to be a video quiz after this. I've told you, I think, everything you need to know about this. Get on, excuse me, get on Canvas. Look under quizzes. Short video, it's timed. Don't ask for more time. Get your stuff, know it, you can take notes, use your notes on this quiz, ace it, do really well on it, and there's going to be a time frame where it's available to take. So in other words, you got to be checking in, guys. You got to be on Canvas. Some of you are, I think you think you're on vacation, just looking at your login reports. I don't think you think you're in school, but you are, all right? And you're going to have to take major late credit if you don't get these things done on time. So check into Canvas every day. This is Mr. V from his workshop. I'm saying adios on Kwashiorkor Novid video number 8. Y'all have a wonderful day.